I was hauling grocery bags up Auntie Linda's front steps when the sound hit me. Sharp laughter cutting through the courtyard like broken glass. I froze mid-step. That kind of laughter, it wasn't friendly. It was aimed. It was cruel. I pretended to adjust the bags just to buy a few seconds, just to make sure I wasn't imagining any of it. Then I heard her. Mrs. Whitford, the landlord's wife, pointed straight at Auntie's balcony, muttering loud enough for half the complex to hear, "She's worthless, just another burden on this place." Worthless. The word echoed inside me like a slap. Her son Tyler immediately piled on, laughing even harder. "Yeah, and did you see her car? Looks like something a failed person would drive." The group chuckled with him, open, shameless, confident that no one would ever call them out. And that's when Auntie stepped onto the balcony, at the worst possible moment. She heard everything, every word, every laugh. I watched her back stiffen, her fingers curled around the railing, trembling, but she forced a polite smile anyway, a smile that was nothing but pain pressed into shape. They didn't lower their voices, not even for a second. They kept going, mocking her, judging her, tearing her down in front of people just watering their plants or grabbing their mail like it was some community entertainment show. Heat surged through my chest, rage, embarrassment, helplessness, all twisted together. It felt like someone was insulting my dignity, my worth, even though the target was her. When I walked inside, she tried to laugh it off, waving her hand like the insults were dust floating in the air. "I'm used to it," she whispered. That hurt more than the insults themselves. She unpacked groceries in this heavy silence, too heavy, too practiced, the kind of silence someone learns when they've spent years swallowing humiliation without anyone to defend them. I watched her hand shake as she tried to open a pickle jar. Just a simple jar, yet her fingers trembled like she was fighting the whole world at once. Something in me snapped. This wasn't just a moment. It wasn't just an insult. This was the trigger, the line in the sand. I decided right then and there I would never let anyone talk about her like that again. Not ever. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly know, was that behind her quiet eyes, behind that forced smile, behind all that trembling pain, Auntie already had a plan so powerful, so precise, so devastating, it would flip the entire building upside down. I grew up in Auntie Linda's house after my mother died when I was 9. Her home wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was the only place where grief didn't swallow me whole. She made sure of that. She worked double shifts at a nursing home, 12 hours on her feet, aching knees, a tired back, just to keep me fed, clothed, and steady. And she never complained. Not once. Not when the electricity bill came in higher than expected. Not when the car made that grinding noise she couldn't afford to fix. Not even on the nights I knew she skipped dinner so I could have seconds. She used to laugh at night, soft, gentle, almost rehearsed. I didn't realize until years later that the laughter wasn't for her. It was for me, so I wouldn't see the exhaustion pulling her down. She raised me on one belief, repeated like scripture. Even if the world spits on you, don't spit back. Rise. She lived by it. She breathed it. But not everyone respected the dignity she clung to. The Whitfords certainly didn't. To them, kindness ranked below money, and anyone who didn't meet their standard was invisible. The first time they called her nobody, I was 13. I wanted to scream, cry, destroy something, anything, but Auntie put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Ignore it. People only speak from what they lack." I tried to believe her, but the wound they planted that day never really healed. It grew with me. It shaped the way I saw cruelty, injustice, and the quiet breaking of good people. Auntie gave everything she had, everything, for people who rarely said thank you, yet somehow she was always the one labeled worthless. That word clung to her like a shadow she never asked for. Her dream was painfully simple, to own something of her own, a home, a small condo, even just a tiny piece of land she could stand on and say, "This is mine." But life never made room for her dreams. Medical bills piled up. The car broke down again and again. Notices came in pink envelopes that made her hand shake. She swallowed each disappointment behind soft smiles I learned to recognize too well. The day she heard the Whitfords mocking her from the courtyard, laughing at her balcony, her car, her existence, I saw something shift in her, something I'd never seen before. Her silence changed. It grew heavier, thicker, filled with something that wasn't sadness anymore. It was resolved. And it terrified me because it wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was the kind of resolve people find when they've been hurt for too long and something inside finally stops bending. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that a letter had arrived for her not long before that day. A letter she hadn't told me about. A letter that carried a name from her past and a dream she'd buried long ago. That letter brought something back to life. A possibility. A shift. A future that would soon collide head-on with the neighbors who mocked her. I wouldn't understand any of it until later, but looking back now, that moment on the balcony wasn't just humiliation. It was the reopening of a lifelong wound, and when a wound like that is pressed too hard, it doesn't just hurt, it bleeds, and sometimes it bleeds straight into action. Days after the courtyard incident, the attacks didn't fade. They sharpened. It was almost like the neighbors tasted blood and wanted more. Every morning felt like walking into a new insult, a new jab, a new way for them to remind Aunty that she didn't belong. The first note showed up on her door. A bright yellow sticky slapped right beside the handle. Tyler's handwriting, messy and smug. "Keep poor people's clutter inside." I crumpled it in my fist, ready to storm across the courtyard, but Aunty gently pulled my arm back. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not yet." The words felt strange coming from her, almost rehearsed, almost expectant. Then came Mrs. Whitford's complaint to management. She marched around the complex, pointing at Auntie's flower pots, those carefully arranged marigolds she watered every morning with so much love, and called them an eyesore, the same pots she praised when they sat on other tenants' balconies. Hypocrisy disguised as authority. It didn't stop there. One afternoon, I found deep scratches carved down the side of Auntie's car door. Angry, deliberate strokes. Scratches so deep the paint curled at the edges. Someone wanted her to feel it, to see it, to break from it. I wanted to confront them. I wanted to scream in their faces, but every time I opened my mouth, Auntie stopped me with that same quiet warning. Not yet. That yet started to haunt me. She wasn't scared. She wasn't defeated. She was waiting for something. Rumors began spreading next. Whispers that Auntie was behind on rent. Whispers started by the same people who watched her drop off her payments early every month. They said she was taking advantage of the complex. They said she was a burden, a freeloader. The reason rules had to be tighter. Tyler found her in the parking lot one afternoon and smirked as he leaned against her damaged door. "You need charity help, Linda?" he asked, voice dripping with fake sympathy. She didn't even look up. She just walked past him, but I saw her fingers clench into a fist, nails pressing into her palm. The weight of it all kept piling up, an avalanche of small cruelties crushing her dignity piece by piece. One evening, long after midnight, I heard a sound I'd never heard from her before. Soft crying. She thought I was asleep. She didn't know I was standing in the hallway, listening to her whisper into the dark. "Why do they hate me for existing?" Those words nearly broke me. I felt helpless, furious, useless, like the world was pressing its boot against her neck and daring her to rise. The tension in the building grew suffocating. Even the air in the hallways felt hostile, charged with the kind of cruelty people pretend not to see. And then, everything shifted. A thick envelope arrived in the mailbox addressed to Linda Hawkins. The moment she held it, something changed in her face. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the pages, widened, then froze. She sank into the nearest chair like her legs simply gave up. "Auntie," I whispered, "what is it?" She looked at me, calm, steady, almost eerily composed. "It's time," she said. That was all. Just 2 words. 2 words that felt like thunder rolling under the floorboards. I didn't understand. Not yet. But something huge had just shifted in her world. That same night, the Whitfords decided to push one step further. They stood in the courtyard, voices raised, mocking her loud enough for the entire complex to hear. "Stop pretending you belong here," Mrs. Whitford shouted. "Yeah," Tyler added, "go live somewhere that matches your status." Auntie walked past them slowly. No flinch, no tear, no tremble. For the first time ever, she didn't look hurt. She looked ready. Ready for something they couldn't see coming. Ready for something they would never be prepared for. And I finally understood. Her silence wasn't a weakness. It was quiet before a storm. The next morning, I find Auntie dressed in a crisp blazer, papers neatly held in her hand. She looks calm, too calm, the kind of calm that feels like a warning. She asks me to drive her downtown. Her voice is steady, unshakably steady, and that alone makes my stomach tighten. "Shows?" When we pull up to a towering glass law office, the kind wealthy people visit for complicated, expensive things, I almost slam on the brakes. Auntie never comes to places like this. Inside, a lawyer steps forward with a warm, confident smile. "Congratulations again, Miss Hawkins." My heart drops. Congratulations for what? In a conference room lined with mahogany and city views, Auntie slides an envelope towards me. It's a formal notice from an estate attorney. Her childhood best friend, the one who passed away last year, left her a massive inheritance. Money is so large, it feels unreal. Money she never believed was actually coming until today. I stare at the page, stunned, my throat dry. The lawyer explains she now has more than enough to buy property. Not just one property, multiple. Then he mentions something that makes the room tilt. The apartment building where the Whitfords live, the same Whitfords who call her worthless, is being sold quietly because their landlord filed for bankruptcy. Auntie turns to me with eyes sharper than I've ever seen. "They called me worthless," she says softly. "Let's see if they can say it to their new landlord." My pulse spikes. This is a side of her I've never seen determined. Unafraid, unstoppable. She signs paperwork, offer letters, transfer documents, things I barely understand, but watch with awe as she moves with absolute certainty. Auntie Hawkins is buying the entire building. Days later, everything snaps into place with one phone call. Landlord contacts the Whitfords to inform them that ownership has changed hands. They panic. They demand to know who bought their building. He gives them the name calmly. Linda Hawkins. In a single moment, the power dynamic doesn't just shift, it flips completely. The next morning, Auntie and I walk into the courtyard, the same courtyard where neighbors usually whisper, judge, and gossip about anyone who walks by. But today, it's different. Every single tenant is standing there, holding an official letter from the new owner. Auntie Hawkins' name is printed in bold across the top of every page. The Whitfords freeze when they see her. They look like they've seen a ghost, or worse, a reality they never imagined. Mrs. Whitford's voice cracks as she stammers, Is this some kind of joke?" Auntie's expression stays perfectly calm. "Again, no, but calling me worthless was." Tyler's trademark smirk, his weapon of choice, evaporates. For the first time since I've known him, he looks genuinely afraid. A crowd starts forming. Tenants sense something big is happening and they gather, hopeful, curious, energized. Auntie clears her throat and announces the new building policies. Full maintenance upgrades, reduced rent for elderly residents, a new community garden, Strict enforcement against harassment. Everything the Whitfords refused to do, ignored, or exploited for years. The tenants erupt in applause. For the first time in ages, the courtyard feels alive, like justice is finally breathing again. Then Aunty does something I don't expect. Nah. She hands the Whitfords a sealed envelope. Mrs. Whitford snatches it open, and her face drains of color. Inside is a 60-day termination of their lease, issued legally and backed by multiple documented harassment complaints from tenants. They explode, shouting, accusing, calling her petty, vindictive, unqualified. But Aunty doesn't flinch. She looks directly at them and says, "You taught me that power makes a person valuable. I disagree. Kindness does. And you failed that test." Silence spreads across the courtyard, heavy, electric, unforgettable. Tyler steps toward me, trying to intimidate me one last time. But before I can react, Aunty calmly steps between us. Her voice is low but unshakable. "Your mother raised you to bully people you think are beneath you. I hope this teaches you something." Security arrives and escorts the Whitfords inside to gather their belongings. For the first time ever, they are the ones humiliated in front of everyone. Not Aunty. Not me. Justice arrives quietly, clean, precise, and absolutely undeniable. Weeks pass and the building slowly turns into something it hasn't been in years, a place that feels alive. Fresh paint covers the peeling walls. New security lights brighten the walkways at night. Flowers bloom again on balconies that used to look abandoned and tired. People start coming out of their apartments more often. Neighbors talk, laugh, help each other carry groceries. The energy shifts. Hope replaces tension. And right in the center of it all is Aunty. Tenants begin treating her with genuine respect. Not because she owns the building, but because they finally see her kindness, her resilience, her quiet dignity that survived so much cruelty. I notice her walking differently now, lighter, freer, unburdened. The weight she carried for years is gone. She joins community events instead of watching from her balcony in silence. She laughs more. She listens more. She shows up in ways she never could before. With part of her inheritance, she creates a tenant support fund, a safety net for people going through hard times. When she announces it, an elderly neighbor breaks down crying and hugs her. "No landlord has ever cared before," she says through tears. Auntie's smile that day is the most genuine I've ever seen, soft, warm, reaching all the way to her eyes. One evening, as we sit outside watching kids play in the courtyard, she says quietly, "Revenge wasn't the goal. Respect was." That line sticks with me, sharp, unforgettable, because she's right. She didn't win by hurting them. She won by rising above them. The Whitfords move out quietly, their windows dark and empty. No one misses them. No one asks where they went. Peace settles over the building like a soft breeze at dusk. And for the first time in my life, I see Aunty living without fear, without shame, without shrinking herself to survive. Watching her finally become the woman she always deserved to be. It heals something in me too. Something I didn't realize was broken. The world looks different when justice finally wins. As the sun slips behind the rooftops, the courtyard glows in soft orange, quiet, warm, nothing like the battlefield it once felt like. And standing in the center of it all, I can't help replaying the day they called her worthless. That single word, the way it made her hands shake, the way she forced a smile so I wouldn't see her break, the way loneliness wrapped around her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. But then I look at her now, Aunty Linda, strong, confident, unshakable, a woman who rebuilt herself piece by piece, and then rebuilt an entire community with her. She didn't scream. She didn't fight back in anger. She didn't throw punches or threats. No, her revenge arrived quietly. In paperwork, signatures, ownership documents, in the slow reclaiming of dignity that had been stolen from her for years. It made me realize something. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits until the universe is finally ready to hand someone the justice they deserved a long time ago. I learned that the people you underestimate often carry the most powerful stories. That humiliation can be the spark that lights a transformation. And that kindness, when backed by courage, can humble even the loudest bullies in the room. So, if you're listening to this, if anyone ever made you feel small, invisible, or unworthy, remember Aunty Linda. Remember the woman they called worthless, who bought the very walls that once echoed with their insults. And if you want more stories like this, stories where dignity rises, where strength wins, where justice finds its way home, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next chapter.